Welcome to the How You Got Started podcast, helping you find your passions by hearing stories from entrepreneurs that are living theirs. Today, we're speaking with Miki Ackermann from Culture and Talent Works. Thank you so much for joining me today, Miki.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me about your business. What do you do? How do you serve? And what makes you unique?
Oh, thank you for asking. Yeah, that's a great question. So when I meet new people, I tell them simply I'm an HR consultant, but I'm much more than that. I'm an OD practitioner. So OD stands for Organizational Development.
Okay.
What makes me different from other HR consultants is that, yes, I can help with the compliance and the basic HR, and I do an HR audit, and we can help with all the other transactional HR materials and policies and procedures that they need to have in place. But again, the differentiator that I offer is that OD lens. So that's actually my background and my training. And what that means is that I look at the organization as a whole. So one of my taglines is building your business purposefully, which means you look at what's your vision, what's your mission, what are your values, what's the desired culture you want to build. And I can help do that. And everything should align with that. So you as a business owner, you will know what you're hoping to create, what you're trying to build, and that is based on your why, your purpose. So I'm doing this for a reason, and my purpose might be whatever it is, X, Y, and Z. And everything should flow out of that, and that's what I can help them determine from a people management perspective. So I'm not going to help them with finances and marketing and all of those things, but from a people perspective. So how do my HR policies flow out of my purpose and my vision? How do my values reflect that? Do I even have values? And what's the culture that I'm trying to build? And does that culture, again, enhance the values, the vision, and the mission?
So tell me what that actually looks like. When you go into a company and you help them with their mission, their vision, and their values, what are the next steps?
Well, what I like to do, and that's based on my training, but I think most of us, when we look at an organization, we try and understand it holistically. Certainly I do. So as an OD practitioner, I go in and I analyze the entire organization. I do ask some questions about finance as well, because it does tie back again to the strategy, the business strategy. So I start with the business strategy, and usually businesses have some kind of a vision and a mission and an idea of what they're trying to build. And then we look at everything from structure and processes to communication methodologies to whatever HR protocols they have in place, any people management systems they have, and so on. So we look at it from stem to stern, basically, and I meet with their staff members. It could be the entire leadership team, depending on the size of the organization. And I'm targeting small to mid-sized businesses at this point in my career or in my entrepreneurship. And then I'll meet with some of their staff as well. So once that data has been gathered, you get a very good picture of what's happening in the organization and what's not happening in the organization. So I pull all that data together, which I've gathered from them. It's their data that they've provided to me. What I provide is the structure and the questions of what we're looking at. And then based on that, I present recommendations, right? So those recommendations can vary. For example, one of the companies I'm working with, I think there were 6 steps in the recommendation, and we looked at 3 and implemented the top, or according to the CEO, owner, or founder's priorities, we looked at implementing just the top 3 in her mind. Those were the top 3.
And what were those top 3?
Oh, sure. Communication, culture, and HR.
Okay.
HR changes. So what happens with a lot of small business and medium-sized, this is a mid-sized company, is as the business grows and the owners are so busy growing the business, they don't have a lot of time looking at all of the aspects of HR or all of the aspects of culture. They have a vision. They know exactly. That's the beauty of entrepreneurs, right? They know what they want to do and they go after it, but they can't possibly do it all. And what I hear from small business owners is that's where they experience stress. It's that psychological burden of trying to juggle everything. And that's where I can come in and help them out with the people management side of it, right? As well as the culture side. So that organizational development perspective with a people lens.
Right. So of those 3 things, you said HR, communication, and
culture.
So what are some specific things that you implement for, say, culture and then communication in HR? What are some specific aspects?
Again, it depends on the organization and what they're doing. So for example, the culture piece might be articulating the cultural values. So business owners tend to have them up here, right? I know what my values are, and they're not always very good at writing them out. So writing them out, and they can do it by themselves, or if they're established enough and they have a leadership team surrounding them or people who've come up with them as they're building the organization, the company, and the business, I always recommend you do it together. But if that's their choice, right? If they choose not to, that's fine. Or they have a business partner or whoever that might be, they need to sit down and then articulate what are our values. And then we build behaviors that support those values. And then we build structures and process and artifacts that support that culture. Because it's not good enough to have your culture and your values articulated on a poster and hanging that on the wall. That's not going to bring about change, right? You need to live it. You need to put life into it, and you need to breathe life into it, which means you behave according to your culture and values, you make decisions according to your culture and values, you draft policies and procedures according to your cultures and values. For example, one of the HR requirements is to have a privacy statement or statements around how you will monitor the electronics in the workplace. How you choose to do that can absolutely reflect your culture and your values.
Absolutely.
Does that make
They're monitoring all of your emails, like how trusted do you feel if they value trust?
Exactly. Exactly. Because you don't have to. You can also couch it in a different way. You can say, we will look at things when X, Y, and Z happen versus we're going to monitor everything. All the time, right? And so as a business owner, you have those choices. And again, this is where I can come in and help and say, look, you have to have some kind of policy around electronic monitoring and privacy statements and things like that. How you decide to implement that is where I can help you make that decision, right?
Okay, so change is hard. Nobody likes to change. Our brain is wired to, keep homeostasis, even if the situation we're in isn't good for us. So how do you affect change, or how do you create change in the companies that you work with?
So my philosophy around creating change is that it's not up to me to create the change, actually. I work with the business owners and their leaders to help bring about the change. So in partnership with the owner and their team members, we decide what change needs to happen. I, as the expert, can come in and provide recommendations, and then they choose and they can pick from those recommendations what kind of changes they want to implement. And then I can support them with a change management plan that looks at how are we going to communicate this, who's going to be involved, what training, what supports do we build around it, what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks, what are the risks, all of those. So an entire change management plan is drafted, but again, it's not mine to own. I can come in and provide the resources, the structure, the tools to help them manage the change. And I do that. It depends on the business owner. Sometimes I hold their hands and I'll be in the change meeting with them, and other times they want to own it, and I, again, provide the tools and off they go and they run.
What are some of the biggest payoffs that they get from implementing the changes you suggest?
If it's a communication change, for example, the biggest payoff, and this is how I tend to sell it, if you want, is engagement, motivation, and interest of your employees. That's usually a stumbling block. And by the way, most of the employees tell me that. When I recommend a communication change, it's because the employees have said to me, we don't know what's going on, or we don't get to talk to the owner enough, or we don't meet enough as a team, or I don't know what my colleague is doing down the hall. So it's a gap and a challenge that's been identified by the employees. And then all I do is I get the privilege of presenting that information back to the business owner and saying, here's what your employees, your staff, your leadership team is saying, and here's some recommendations. What else do you think? And so even the recommendation is just the starting point, and then we can build a plan based on that.
What an excellent audit for a company to do. How often should a company audit themselves on like this?
Well, I recommend once a year. Now, not a full organizational development audit, but I recommend at least once a year an HR audit. again, looking at it from top to bottom, looking at all your policies again, what's changed inside the organization, what's changed outside in our industry or from a legislative perspective. So you need to audit HR once a year. The rest of the organization, I mean, owners, and I put this in my newsletter tips as well, owners tend to build a strategic plan every year. Well, that's an opportunity to audit your organization, right? And say, what's my plan for this year?
What about this job gets you the most excited?
Oh, I think doing the initial assessment, actually. I love doing assessments and talking to people. I love meeting people and finding out what they're doing well as a business, and then what are the potential gaps that exist? How do we protect the strengths they have, and then how do we maintain them or change them and tweak them a little bit? And then how do we address the gaps that exist?
What would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that companies make from an HR perspective?
Yeah, for a small, mid-sized company, I would say compliance. And I've actually had business owners say that to me. I'm not too worried about compliance. We're too small, or I'm so busy growing, I don't need to worry too much about it. I'm more worried about retention and turnover. I'm more worried about keeping my employees happy and things like that, which works well when your employees are happy. But once you have just that one employee who's disgruntled, it's going to cost you a lot of money and a lot of headaches. So I think compliance is a mistake that they overlook. What's another mistake? I think sometimes they forget to consider the cultural piece, especially if you're a customer-facing organization. We talk about brand a lot. Well, your culture is your brand as well. And your employees are your brand ambassadors. And a lot of small business owners forget that and forget how valuable their employees can be in marketing their company. So that's the twist that I can provide companies as well, is recognizing the value their employees bring, not only in accomplishing the tasks and growing the business, but growing the business from a marketing perspective and making sure that your brand and your reputation, especially in smaller markets where you and I are, for example, but even in, Mississauga, Brampton, whatever, people talk. And social media is very loud these days. So making sure that there is alignment between your values, your brand, your reputation, and how your employees feel about it.
Tell me about yourself. Why did you get into this line of work, and what were some of the challenges that you've had to overcome personally and professionally?
I have, from a very young age, always had a desire to do the right thing and to help others. Even though I received a degree years ago in social work and helped in that capacity for a while, I moved away from that to mental health education, and then training and development, and then HR, and then organizational development. And in that capacity, my goal, my hope always is to make a difference in the lives of employees and in the lives of business owners. So I mentioned earlier how stressful it is for business owners to juggle everything as they grow their business. And that's my mission and my vision, is to help them figure out a way to grow their business with purpose and do it in a way that not only allows them to achieve their goals, but do it in a way that's right and that's values-based. So for me, I think it was about 15 years ago, at least 15 years ago, I realized how important values are. Actually, it was much more than 15 years. It was probably about 25 years ago. And I realized how important it is not only to know what your values are, but also to recognize how you live them and to actually gain that alignment between who you want to be and how you behave.
Absolutely.
And so when I worked for large corporations in this role as HR and organizational development practitioner, that was my job always, is helping the corporations understand or helping to create the strategic plan around that from that OD perspective based on values, which is, if our values are integrity, financial stability, making a difference, whatever that value was or are, how do we make them come to life in an organization?
That's beautiful. That is some great purpose-driven work.
Thank you. Thank you. So I've tried to live my life according to values as well. I think, like everybody, I've made some major mistakes in my life, and I've learned from that and have learned to live up to my values. And I do that in, every aspect of my life. So, for example, one of my values is social justice and respect. And I do that by volunteering and helping others out who aren't as fortunate as we are, as me and my family, right? I do that. One of my values, for example, is health and balance. So my day consists of eating well and resting when I need to and exercising so I stay healthy, right? And so those little tangible things, I think, are what make me happy. And if I can help others get to that point in their life of, again, finding that balance between who you want to be and how you behave, aligning those two, I think is extremely helpful.
I'm like right there with you. I am in that stage where I've made big mistakes in my life, and because of certain things, I realized that because I didn't have boundaries, proper boundaries in place, and because of past traumas, and, I allowed people to manipulate me in certain ways. And really, when you don't live to your values, it's soul crushing.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
And I think it's those mistakes, those soul-crushing events that really wake you up to, okay, who do I want to be? And
exactly.
And if you can help people get to that, like living purposefully, aligning, like you said, aligning their values with their actions, that is such a wonderful purpose.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I try.
I love that.
I'm trying.
Yeah. Well, we're all trying.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Are there any clients that you won't work with?
Well, I think they will probably remove themselves from me just through their behaviors. So I will not work with clients who talk out of both sides of their mouth. So if you say you want to live according to your values and then we work together to make that happen, and then you kibosh it or you sabotage it as a business owner, I will pull myself out because you're paying me, right, to get that value alignment between who you want to be, what you want your business to be, to live up to your why. And if you're sabotaging that, there's no point in working with me or paying me.
Yeah.
Right? So they will kind of filter themselves out. But if there's someone who is a small, mid-sized business owner who's interested in, yes, the transactional, fundamental HR stuff, but also moving beyond that to helping them achieve their vision and their cultural desires, I'll absolutely work with them. And it has been so refreshing to work with business owners like that.
Yes, small, medium size that are just so passionate about what they do and trying to grow. What advice would you give someone who is hiring their very first employee?
So the advice I would give a small business owner who is thinking about hiring their first employee is to think about who they want to be and what their brand and reputation is all about, and then hire someone that can meet that. And certainly thinking about what you can afford. So if it is an employee, not only do you have to pay their wage, but we usually say about 30% on top of that are things like CPP, EI, taxes. And of course, the employee's deductions are something that you as an employer are responsible for, but then you also pay those things. So hence it's 30%, right, usually. Then you may want to consider benefits or vacation pay. All those things are required. So do you pay vacation pay immediately on every pay stub, or do you allow them to accumulate it, etc.? So there's a lot of pieces involved. Opening up a CRA payroll account. There's a lot of little minutia and details when you do your first hire. The other thing I would advise a small business owner is to think maybe you don't need to hire an employee. Maybe it's a subcontractor, and it's much simpler because the subcontractor is a business on its own. And then you just pay the business owner, and that business owner takes care of their own taxes and things like that. They will probably charge you HST and GST if they need to, depending on how much money they make. But those are all considerations. So what can you afford? Does this person reflect your brand, your reputation, and your values? So you want to find that value alignment again. And what tasks? So we talked about the who and the why, and then what tasks will this person complete, right? So you want to ask yourself as a business owner, what's taking up a lot of my time during the day? And is that time adding to the growth and to the bottom line of my business? If it's not, for example, administrative tasks, are those things that you can then ask somebody else to help you with.
So tell me, do you help companies that already have an HR department? Or if you do, how do you add value?
Right. I do both. Companies that don't have an official HR team, or most of them, small, mid-sized companies, will have someone who does office management and then HR, right? Or accounting, finance, and HR. But I also work with companies that have an HR manager and then an HR admin. And the value I bring is that expert knowledge, right? So if it's someone who's in a small, mid-sized company, usually they've come from that kind of environment, whereas I can come from a very large corporate environment. I do come from that large corporate environment and can provide that big picture strategic overview. The other thing that's different is a lot of HR managers and practitioners get caught up in the day-to-day minutia. There's a lot involved in managing HR. And so it's difficult for them unless they have more resources, but for a small, mid-sized company, they don't have all those resources, to juggle the strategic vision of HR and people management. And that's where I can come in as a fractional HR and OD, organizational development practitioner, to say, okay, let's build that strategic people plan and help them look at that, from a 10,000-foot perspective, right? Yes, yeah. I'm also really good at training and coaching HR practitioners and training them up to that level. Again, because a lot of them are caught in the day-to-day minutia, right?
If someone wanted to contact you, what's the best way to find you and learn about your services?
They can find me through my website. It's cultureandtalentworks.com. They can email me directly through there, or they can give me a call. My phone number, my full contact information is on my website.
So I've been to your website, and it's a really nice site. You have some great content on there. There's a lot of in-depth articles, and you also have a wonderful newsletter. Give me a little bit of like a taste of what's in there, what people can expect.
Yeah, great. Thank you for asking. I would love for entrepreneurs to visit my website because there's a lot of really good information, as you mentioned. Thank you very much again for saying that. Free tips around human resources and organizational development. An example of that would be in December, we talked about closing up the year properly. So making sure that your performance reviews are done correctly and things like that. How do you start the year up properly? So you should have a strategic plan, and including people issues in that strategic plan. Because again, as a small, mid-sized business owners, we often think of finances, marketing, customers, sales, tools, operations, and HR or people kind of come in as an afterthought. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, right? So my newsletter in December talked about that.
If someone wanted to get into the line of work that you do, what types of steps would you suggest they take to be able to be competent and knowledgeable and help businesses?
Well, if it's straight HR, you would start with that, and you can get that at a lot of colleges and universities, and there's a lot of great joint programs between colleges and universities to get a business degree in HR. For the organizational development piece, I recommend Queen's University, and I believe it's York Schulich School of Business has an organizational development certificate you can get now. U of T might offer that as well. So in this area, right? Otherwise, there are a lot of master's programs in organizational development that exist online, and a lot of American universities have them. So There's
A lot of
different
options.
A lot of options. Yes, absolutely. So, and I've taken a lot of training throughout the years. I'm one of those people that continues to want to grow and learn. And although I think I've hit a point now where I feel like I've done enough. Lots of certifications and things like that, but certainly. And I'm happy to talk to anybody about that. I've done mentoring in the past for people who are interested in getting into organizational development. So if somebody wants to know more about that and how to get into it, please reach out to me. Happy to help them out.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It was great to hear your perspective on organizational development, human resources, and how you use values to make a difference in the growth of businesses locally and I'm sure abroad.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was great to speak with you.
And thank you for joining us. For the Hugs offer, you can quote Hugs Culture, and you'll be able to get a 30-minute consultation and 20% off your first hour with the lovely Miki. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great day.